Captain Elias Ward had crossed many stars in his career, but nothing prepared him for the moment when he first set foot inside the shining palace of the Veyari Empire. The capital world, Celeuranis, hung in space like a jewel wrapped in glowing clouds. Its towers stretched into the skies, built from crystals that shimmered with inner light. Even after years of serving the Terran fleet, Elias felt small compared to the grandeur of the place. Humanity had fought, bargained, and bled its way into the galactic stage. But this was different. This was not war. This was diplomacy, and Elias Ward, a soldier-turned-envoy, was chosen to represent humanity in the halls of one of the galaxy's most ancient monarchies. He carried himself with calm discipline, his dark uniform pressed, his boots gleaming, but beneath the surface he carried unease. The Veyari were known for their elegance, their strange customs, and their obsession with honor. A single misstep could sour the fragile relations between their empire and Earth. Elias repeated the ambassador's warning in his mind. Observe, respect, adapt. He thought he was ready. He was not. Summoned to the princess. The palace guides moved with graceful silence, their robes trailing like streams of water. None of them spoke to him directly, though he caught their glances. Studies of his broad shoulders, his human stride, the quiet strength in his eyes. They led him deeper into the palace, past hallways lined with murals of ancient victories, past fountains that sang with strange tones, until at last he reached a door unlike the others. It was circular, made of living vines that opened as if breathing. One of the attendants gestured for him to enter. The princess requests your presence. Elias blinked. He had expected a formal court, an audience hall, or perhaps a grand reception. But instead he was being brought to private chambers, alone. Still, duty was duty. He straightened his posture, adjusted the translator pinned to his collar, and stepped inside. The shock, the room glowed with soft violet light. The walls curved like the inside of a seashell. Incense drifted in the air, carrying a scent both floral and sharp. At the center, upon a raised platform of glass-like stone, stood the figure of Princess Silari, heir to the Veyari throne, and she wore nothing. Elias froze. For a heartbeat, his mind refused to process the sight. His instincts screamed that he had intruded on something sacred, something private. His soldier's training told him to avert his gaze, to retreat, to apologize, but his legs locked in place. Silari turned, her silver-blue eyes widening in surprise at his reaction. Her skin shimmered faintly under the chamber light, not in the crude way a human might imagine, but like polished marble touched by moonlight. She was not embarrassed. No, her people did not view this as shameful. Instead, she looked shocked that he was shocked. Their eyes met, and the silence stretched between them. Elias swallowed, his throat dry. He forced his gaze upward, toward her face, though heat crept along his neck. Your Highness, forgive me. I did not expect. She tilted her head, her long crest of pale hair flowing down her back. Her voice was smooth, melodic, though tinged with confusion. You did not expect purity? Cultural misunderstanding. Elias tried to steady his breath. On Earth, in my culture, such openness is not common when meeting strangers. The princess blinked slowly, her expression unreadable. But among the Veyari, one must meet unshielded, without cloth, without armor, before true words can be spoken. Only then is honesty revealed. It is tradition. He realized, with a sharp twist in his chest, that his reaction had already been seen as strange, perhaps even insulting. Yet her voice held more curiosity than anger. Silari stepped closer, moving with the effortless grace of one born into power. Tell me, human, why do your kind fear what is natural? Elias took a careful breath, searching for words that would not spark offense. It is not fear, Your Highness. It is respect. We cover ourselves because privacy has meaning to us. To be unclothed is considered deeply personal. To reveal it without trust would be unusual. The princess studied him, her silver eyes narrowing slightly, then softening, curious. So your people hide themselves and call that respect. We reveal ourselves and call that trust. Two paths to the same meaning. Elias felt the tension ease slightly in his chest. Her words carried no mockery, only genuine interest. The first exchange, Silari gestured for him to sit upon a low crystal bench near the platform. She remained standing, unbothered by his discomfort. Captain Elias Ward, she said, using his full name with flawless precision. "Your people have a reputation among the stars. The DEATHWORLDers. The ones who thrive where others cannot. Why did they send you to me?" Elias met her gaze, his soldier's calm returning. "Because I have seen war, but I also understand peace. I was chosen to represent what humans can be when they are not fighting." Solari tilted her head as though weighing his words. "And yet, when you saw me, you reacted with alarm. That was no mask. That was truth." Elias flushed slightly, though he kept his voice level. "Yes, the truth is, I was surprised. But not out of disrespect, only out of difference. Where I come from, such a meeting would be considered private. I worried I had dishonored you." The princess gave a sound that might have been a laugh, soft like the ringing of crystal. "Dishonor? No, you revealed yourself more honestly than any courtier. They would bow, flatter, and hide their thoughts. You did not, that is, refreshing. Seeds of curiosity." The conversation drifted from there, not about politics or treaties, but about customs. She asked him about human rituals, meals, festivals, even why humans wore colors that did not match the stars. He spoke simply, answering as best as he could, careful not to embellish. In return, she explained the Ve'ari rite of purity, how each royal must greet potential allies without barrier, to show they had nothing hidden. To them, garments in such moments symbolized deceit. Elias listened carefully, realizing that what began as an embarrassing blunder was becoming something more. The start of understanding. Closing of Part 1 at last, an attendant entered, bowing low. "Your Highness, the council awaits." Solari raised her hand, silencing them. Her eyes lingered on Elias, sharp and thoughtful. "This human is not what the whispers claimed," she said softly, as if speaking to herself. Elias rose, giving a respectful bow. "Your Highness." As he turned to leave, she spoke again. "Captain Ward, tomorrow you will join me before the council. Let us see if your honesty shines as brightly before them as it did before me." Elias nodded, though inside his chest his heart pounded. He had come prepared for politics, for careful words and practiced gestures. Instead, he had stumbled into something far stranger and far more dangerous. A test of trust, played out before an empire, and though he had entered the chamber unready, though the princess's shock had been plain, he knew this was only the beginning. The next morning, Captain Elias Ward walked through the great halls of the Ve'ari palace with measured steps. The walls glittered like frozen light, and the floor reflected his image as though he were walking on still water. Guards in silver armor watched him silently, their expressions unreadable beneath crystalline helmets. But silence was deceiving. Elias felt the whispers even if he could not hear every word. Servants glanced at him, their eyes lingering a moment too long before turning away. Courtiers shifted when he passed, their voices low but sharp, like knives sliding against one another. He knew the meaning of those whispers. What had happened in the princess's chamber the night before was already spreading. To the humans, it had been a moment of awkwardness, of cultural difference. To the Ve'ari, who lived by ritual and honor, it had become a story that grew with each telling. Some said the human envoy had disrespected the princess. Others claimed he had mocked their sacred rite. A few even whispered that the princess herself had broken tradition by not preparing him properly. Whatever the truth, Elias understood one thing. The council would not look at him as a neutral envoy. He would be walking into judgment, meeting before the council. The throne chamber of the Ve'ari council was vast and glowing, built in a circle so that no seat was higher than another. Light shone from the ceiling in shifting patterns, like constellations that moved across the dome. At the center stood a crystal dais where one was called to speak. Princess Solari entered first, wearing ceremonial robes of flowing silver and blue. Though clothed now, her presence still radiated authority. She moved with calm dignity, as though last night's incident had not disturbed her. Behind her, Elias followed, every eye upon him. The counselors were a ring of elder Ve'ari, their robes marked with jeweled emblems of their houses. Some looked at him with interest, others with clear disapproval. The high counselor, an aged figure with skin faintly golden, raised a hand. "Captain Elias Ward of Earth, you were summoned to speak of your people's intentions. Yet rumors of dishonor reach our ears before your first words. Tell us, why did you react as you did in the chambers of our princess?" The chamber fell silent. All eyes turned to Elias, Elias stepped forward onto the dais. He felt the weight of the silence, but he kept his voice steady. Honored counselors, I will not deny what happened. When I first entered the princess's chamber, I was surprised. Among humans, such openness is not common. We call it private. To us, to stand unguarded in such a way is something we share only with great trust. My reaction was not one of disrespect, but of difference. I feared I had already failed before I had spoken a word. There was a stir among the council. Some frowned, others exchanged glances. A few whispered too quietly for the translator to catch. Solari lifted her chin and spoke, her voice calm but sharp. And yet he did not flee. He did not hide his reaction behind flattery. His truth was plain. That is why I requested his presence here. The human spoke without a mask, even when embarrassed. Can we say the same of every voice in this chamber? The words caused a ripple, some counselors bristling at her challenge. Seeds of doubt. One counselor, robed in deep crimson, rose. His voice carried clear distrust. Princess, with respect, you defend him too quickly. These humans are DEATHWORLDers. They thrive on violence. Perhaps his reaction was not honesty but insult. Perhaps he wished to unsettle you. To test how far he could push your patience, murmurs spread again. Elias stood silently, his hands at his sides, but his gaze stayed fixed and steady. Solari turned her eyes upon the crimson-robed counselor. Do you believe so? Then explain why he saved face by speaking the truth rather than lying. A deceiver would have flattered me. He did not. Another counselor spoke, softer but thoughtful. Perhaps this honesty is their strength. The humans conquered harsh worlds because they see what others ignore. Even discomfort becomes truth to them. Elias listened carefully. He knew better than to interrupt. Among humans, speaking quickly could win arguments. Among the Veyari, patience earned respect. A private conversation. After the council dismissed for a recess, Solari led Elias to a quieter chamber, away from the circle of judgment. It was a garden beneath a dome of glass filled with luminous flowers that shifted colors as if breathing. She turned to him, her silver eyes studying his face. You should know, Captain Ward. There are some in this court who would see you fail no matter what you say. They fear your people. They fear the stories of your wars. To them, you are a weapon disguised in diplomacy. Elias folded his arms lightly behind his back. And you, Princess? Do you believe that? She tilted her head, her hair catching the light. I believe you are different. You did not seek to impress me with false charm. You revealed yourself as you are. That is rare in these halls. There was a pause. The flowers around them glowed softly, their scent like fresh rain. Elias finally said, Your Highness, if I offended you last night, know that it was not my intent. I came here to build trust, not break it. Solari's lips curved slightly, the faintest smile. You did not offend me. You intrigued me. And intrigue, Captain, can be more dangerous than insult. Rising suspicion later that evening as Elias walked the halls, he noticed guards positioned differently than before. Their stances were stiffer, their hands closer to their weapons. He also noticed how servants hushed their voices when he passed, as if waiting for him to slip. It became clear. His presence was not only under question, it was under watch. What unsettled him most was not the open suspicion of some counselors, but the hidden looks of others. The ones who stared too long, then smiled too quickly. The ones who seemed almost pleased at the tension. Elias had seen such looks before on battlefields, in officers who awaited an excuse to strike. This was not just politics. There were factions within the Veyari court, and some were eager to turn him into the spark for conflict. The princess's curiosity that night, Solari invited Elias once more, not to her private chamber but to a library of crystal tablets. She wished to hear more of human ways. She asked about human meals, and he described bread baked in simple ovens, shared among families. She asked about human music, and he explained how even soldiers sang together to keep courage alive. She asked about war, and his eyes grew distant as he told her of battles on barren worlds, where survival depended not only on strength but on protecting one another. Solari listened, her gaze never wavering. To her, each story seemed like a window into a people both fierce and vulnerable, a contradiction. At last she said softly, Your people cover themselves with cloth, with armor, with pride. And yet beneath it there is something open, perhaps more open than us who claim purity. Elias met her eyes. Perhaps openness is not about the body, princess. Perhaps it is about the heart. Her expression shifted, thoughtful, almost troubled. Then maybe it is I who stood unguarded, not you. Closing of part 2, the next day the council would gather again. Rumors would sharpen, challenges would rise, and the tension in the palace would grow. But as Elias left the library that night, he knew something had changed. The princess no longer looked at him as a curiosity alone. She looked at him as a puzzle worth solving, and puzzles, in the courts of empires, often drew danger. For in the shadows of the palace, unseen eyes watched their every meeting, whispering that the human was gaining too much favor. Elias could feel it already. A storm was coming. The days that followed were filled with tension. Captain Elias Ward noticed it in every step he took inside the palace of Celeranus. Guards no longer stood with relaxed dignity but with rigid alertness. Courtiers' whispers grew sharper, their eyes watching not only him but also Princess Solari. Even the palace air seemed heavier, as though the glowing halls carried secrets within their walls. Elias had lived through years of combat. He had marched across battlefields where every shadow could hide an enemy. That same feeling crept into him here, though no weapons were raised. It was not the silence of peace but the silence of waiting. Something was coming. He could feel it. Shadows in the palace. One evening, Elias took the longer route back to his quarters, choosing to walk the less traveled corridors. His boots echoed softly against the crystal floor, and the faint glow of wall lights shimmered against his uniform. Halfway down a hallway, he heard something, footsteps faint, too light to be armored guards. He slowed his pace, listening. The sound was behind him, then gone, then behind again. He turned suddenly. Nothing. The corridor was empty. But Elias knew the signs. He had been followed before, on worlds where enemies blended with civilians. He pressed his hand against the hilt of the ceremonial blade given to him for formality. Not much compared to a soldier's weapon, but better than nothing. Instead of turning back, he continued forward, keeping his pace even, his ears sharp. He stopped before a reflective panel, pretending to study it but really watching behind him through its surface. And there, a shadow slipping into an alcove. Elias said nothing. He moved on, but his muscles stayed tense. Princess Solari's concern the next day. Princess Solari summoned him again, this time to the gardens where trees of silver leaves whispered like wind chimes. "You look unsettled." "Captain," she said, studying his face, "your eyes search the shadows as though you expect enemies there." Elias hesitated, then chose honesty. "Your Highness, I believe I am being watched. Not in the way of guards keeping order, in the way of hunters studying prey." Solari's brow furrowed, a rare crack in her calm. "That is a grave claim. Do you have proof?" "Not yet," Elias admitted. "But instincts kept me alive on worlds where proof came too late. I would not ignore them here." Solari walked slowly among the silver trees, her robe trailing across the grass. "There are those who fear me siding with your people. They whisper that humanity's presence will weaken the Empire, if some among them act on that fear." She stopped, turning to face him. "If you are right, then their true target is not you, Captain. It is me." Elias's jaw tightened. His duty as envoy was clear: protect the Alliance. But in that moment, his soldier's duty returned stronger. Protect her. The first attempt that night. The attempt came. Elias was walking back from a late council discussion when he noticed something strange. The guard who normally stood outside Solari's chambers was gone. In his place stood another figure, helmet shadowed, posture stiff, too stiff. Elias approached carefully. "Where is Guard Sorel?" he asked. The figure's hand twitched toward the weapon at his side. That was all Elias needed. He moved fast, grabbing the wrist before the weapon could be drawn. The fake guard struck back with surprising speed, but Elias twisted, using the man's momentum to slam him against the wall. The weapon, a slender blade that shimmered with poison, clattered to the floor. The commotion drew real guards who rushed in, seizing the attacker. Under the helmet was revealed not a palace guard but an outsider, face marked with the sigil of a rival house. Solari emerged from her chamber, her eyes sharp and cold. So the whispers were true. Treachery walks within these halls. The guards bowed low, awaiting her command. Solari looked at Elias, her gaze steady. "You saw this when no one else did. You trusted your instincts over ceremony. You saved me." Elias inclined his head, though his eyes stayed wary. This was only the first attempt. There will be more. The council divided the captured assassin's presence through the council into chaos. Some shouted that it was a plot to frame rival houses. Others accused the human envoy himself of staging the attack for glory. Elias stood silently as voices rose. He could feel the hostility sharpening against him. Every moment more suspicion turned his way. Finally, Solari raised her hand and the chamber fell quiet. "The human warned me before it happened," she said. "He spoke of shadows watching. Without him, the blade would have found its mark." "Do you doubt his words now?" Some counselors bowed their heads. Others did not. The crimson-robed counselor from before spoke again, his voice sharp. "Perhaps he staged this, Princess. A clever soldier planting an assassin so he might appear the savior. Would that not explain his constant warnings of danger?" Elias did not flinch at the accusation. Instead, he looked directly at the man. "If I wanted influence, counselor, I would not risk my life against a poisoned blade." "There are easier ways to lie than to bleed," the chamber murmured, and though suspicion remained, some nodded reluctantly at his reasoning. A princess's decision that night. Solari summoned Elias again, this time with urgency. "I cannot ignore this," she said. "If there are factions willing to kill me, then the Empire itself is at risk. And yet, many in the council are blind, too concerned with pride to see danger." Elias stood tall, his voice calm, but firm. "Then you need someone who sees danger before it strikes. Someone who does not think like your court does." Her eyes lingered on him, silver pools reflecting determination. "A human." Elias did not answer immediately. He had come as envoy, not as bodyguard. But in truth he had already chosen. His instincts had chosen for him the moment he saw the assassin. "You saved me once," Solari continued softly. "But saving me once is not enough. Will you stand by me until this threat is ended?" Elias met her gaze. "Until the threat is ended, Princess, I will not leave your side." A growing bond from that day. Elias's role changed. He was no longer just the envoy. He became Solari's shadow. He accompanied her to council meetings, watching the faces of nobles more than their words. He walked with her through gardens, studying servants' movements, memorizing patterns until anything unusual stood out. He stood guard outside her chambers at night, silent and unyielding. At first, the court scoffed. A human soldier watching over a princess seemed beneath their dignity. But whispers began to change. For each day Solari lived unharmed, for each suspicious figure Elias uncovered, respect slowly grew. Solari herself seemed to change as well. She asked him more about humanity, not as curiosity but as trust. She listened when he warned of danger, even when others laughed. And sometimes, when they walked together under the palace stars, she would ask questions not as a princess, but as a person. "What do you miss most from Earth?" she asked once. Elias thought a moment. "The sound of rain. On some worlds it never rains. I grew up listening to it every night. It was peace, even in war." She smiled faintly. "Here we have rain only when summoned. Perhaps one day I will ask the skies to fall so you may hear it again." Closing of part 3, but peace was fragile. Each day Elias felt the storm drawing nearer. The failed assassination was not an end, but a beginning. In the shadows of the palace, other conspirators stirred. Nobles who feared humanity's influence sharpened their knives. Factions whispered of rebellion. And though Elias had earned Solari's trust, he knew it came at a cost. The more she trusted him, the more enemies would see him as a threat. The storm was coming. And when it broke, it would not come with whispers. It would come with fire. Elias tightened his grip on the blade at his side. Whatever storm came, he would be ready. The failed assassination attempt should have brought unity to the Veyari court. Instead, it split them further. Some counselors demanded swift justice against the rival house whose mark had been found on the assassin. Others insisted the evidence was too convenient, that it must have been planted, and a few, the loudest of all, kept pointing their fingers at the human envoy. Captain Elias Ward stood silently at Solari's side as the arguments raged around the circle of counselors. He did not flinch at the accusations, though the weight of their stares pressed heavily against him. He knew of the danger before it came. The crimson-robed counselor declared, voice sharp with suspicion. "Convenient, is it not? Perhaps the human brought the assassin himself to gain the princess's favor." Murmurs spread, voices rising like waves. Solari rose from her seat, her presence silencing the chamber. "Enough, Captain Ward saved my life. Do you suggest I reward that with punishment?" The crimson-robed counselor bowed his head slightly but did not relent. Princess, we cannot allow blind trust. If he is loyal, let him prove it. Our people have trials for such matters. Let the human face them. If he is true, he will endure. If he is false, he will fall. The chamber quieted. All eyes turned to Solari. Elias could see the conflict in her gaze. She wished to protect him, but to refuse the trial would only deepen suspicion. At last, she spoke. Very well. The human shall face the trial of trust. The announcement word spread quickly through the palace. Servants whispered of the strange event. Guards trained their eyes on Elias more sharply than ever. Courtiers prepared to watch the human either rise to glory or be broken before them. Solari met Elias in private that evening, her voice low but urgent. I did not want this, but if I refused, they would have accused me of weakness or worse, collusion. The trial is harsh. It was designed for Veyari, not for humans. Elias gave a small nod. What does it involve? 3 stages, Solari said. 1 of mind, 1 of body, and 1 of spirit. Few pass all 3. If you fall, they will say you were never loyal. Elias straightened. Then I'll pass. Solari studied him carefully. Do you understand what it means? The trials are not about fairness. They are about survival. They will throw every obstacle to see if you break. I've survived worse, Elias said simply. On worlds where the ground itself tried to kill me, I lived. I don't plan to stop here. For the first time in many days, Solari smiled faintly. You are a strange creature, Captain Ward. Perhaps that strangeness is your strength. The trial of mind. The council gathered in a chamber of mirrors, its walls shifting with endless reflections. Elias was led to the center alone. A voice boomed from above, the High Counselor. First, the trial of mind. The human must solve the labyrinth of truth. If he cannot, he is unworthy. The mirrors shifted, forming corridors. Elias stepped forward, senses sharp. He knew this was no ordinary maze. Each path reflected dozens of images of himself, twisting and bending, making it impossible to tell direction. But Elias had faced disorientation before. Smoke-filled battlefields, nights with no stars, jungles where every tree looked the same. He calmed his breathing, marking subtle details others might miss. A faint scratch on one mirror, a shift in air currents, the smell of incense stronger in one direction. He moved slowly, deliberately, ignoring false reflections that tried to lead him astray. Hours seemed to pass, but he kept his focus. Finally, he stepped into the center, where the mirrors dissolved into light. The counselors whispered in surprise. Few had expected the human to pass so quickly. Solari allowed herself a breath of relief. The trial of body. The second trial was far harsher. Elias was led to an arena beneath the palace, carved from stone that glowed faintly. Around the circle, nobles and guards filled the seats, eager to see the human tested. The High Counselor raised his hand. Now the trial of body. The human must face a chosen warrior of the Veyari. Strength against strength. Endurance against endurance. The gate opened and a Veyari champion entered. He was taller than Elias, his body armored in ceremonial crystal, his weapon a long staff that pulsed with energy. The crowd murmured, some already expecting the human to fall. Elias stood calmly, his only weapon a simple blade. He knew this would not be won with strength alone. The match began. The champion struck first, his staff sweeping with tremendous speed. Elias dodged, the strike shattering stone where he had stood a second earlier. The fight continued, staff against blade, strength against agility. Elias used every lesson he had learned in battle, never meeting force head-on, always moving, always adapting. He ducked, rolled, feinted, using the champion's momentum against him. At last, when the staff came down in a powerful swing, Elias sidestepped and struck with the hilt of his blade, driving it into the champion's ribs. The warrior stumbled, stunned. Elias pressed the advantage, sweeping the staff from his hands and bringing the fight to an end. The chamber erupted in shouts, some in disbelief, others in awe. The human had endured. Solari's eyes shone with quiet pride. The trial of spirit. The final trial was the most dangerous, though no weapon was involved. Elias was led into a chamber of silence lit only by a single flame at its center. The High Counselor spoke. The trial of spirit is faced alone. The human must confront himself. If he falters, he fails. The doors closed. Elias was left in darkness except for the flame. At first, nothing happened. Then whispers began to echo, his own voice twisted and cruel. You don't belong here. You're only a soldier, not a diplomat. They will never trust you. You will fail the princess just as you failed comrades before. Visions appeared in the shadows, faces of soldiers he had lost, battles he had survived but others had not. Guilt pressed down on him, heavy and suffocating. For a moment, Elias felt the weight crushing him. But then he remembered something, the princess's words. Openness is not about the body, it is about the heart. He straightened, looking into the flame. I carry my losses, he said aloud. But I am still here. I am still fighting, and I will not break. The shadow shrank back. The whispers faded. The flame grew brighter until the doors opened once more. Elias stepped out, his face calm. Judgment. The council chamber was silent as Elias returned from the final trial. He had passed all three. The High Counselor rose slowly. Few have endured every stage. Few are still without faltering. Yet this human has done so. Whatever doubts remain, the trials speak for themselves. Some counselors bowed their heads in reluctant respect. Others remained stiff, unwilling to yield. But none could deny the truth of what they had seen. Solari stood, her voice ringing clear. You demanded proof of his loyalty. He has given it. Let none question it again. Her words carried power, and though whispers still spread, the balance had shifted. Elias Ward was no longer only an envoy. He was something more. After the trial later, in the quiet of the palace garden, Solari spoke softly. You endured what even many Veyari cannot. How did you do it? Elias looked up at the stars. I've learned that survival is not about being the strongest. It's about refusing to give up even when everything pushes you down. Solari studied him, her eyes shining in the starlight. That is why they fear you, Captain Ward. Not because of your weapons, but because of your will. He gave a small smile. Fear isn't what I came here for. I came here to build trust. She returned his smile, rare and genuine. Then perhaps trust has begun. Closing of Part 4, the trials were over, but the danger was not. Elias had proven himself, but in doing so, he had drawn even greater attention. Factions in the shadows would not remain idle. Still, for the first time since arriving, Elias felt the weight on his shoulders lighten. He had faced their tests and he had not broken. And standing beside the princess beneath the glowing stars of Seluranis, he knew his fight was far from finished. The storm was still coming. But now he was ready to face it. The days after the trials should have been calm, yet tension only deepened. Though Elias had passed every challenge, whispers still lingered in the palace corridors. Some nobles bowed politely, but their eyes remained cold. Others kept their distance, avoiding even speaking his name. Solari noticed it too. You proved yourself before the council, she said one evening as she walked with Elias through the palace balcony. But proof does not erase fear. Some will never forgive me for trusting you. Elias leaned against the railing, gazing at the glowing rivers of Seluranis below. Fear is hard to erase. Back home, even among humans, it takes years. Sometimes it never goes away. But trust can grow, even through fear. That's what matters. Solari gave a faint smile. Then we must help it grow. What neither of them knew was that in the shadows of the court, the conspirators were already planning their final strike. They had failed with an assassin. They had failed with slander. Now they prepared for open rebellion. A warning from the stars. The first sign came not from the palace, but from the skies. Veyari star watchers reported strange signals, coded transmissions, not from deep space, but from ships in orbit around Seluranis. Unknown vessels, hidden until now. When the news reached the council, panic rippled through the chamber. These are warships, one shouted. They cannot belong to us. Our fleets are accounted for. Another cried. They must be foreign mercenaries. Solari turned sharply to Elias. You recognize the pattern? Elias frowned as the data flickered on the display. The signals were crude but familiar. Not mercenaries, pirates, deathworlders from the rim. Murmurs filled the chamber. Pirates were feared across the galaxy for their ruthlessness. No one expected them to appear here orbiting a royal world. But Elias noticed something more. This isn't random. Someone here called them. Someone inside your court. The council erupted again, arguments rising like fire. Solari silenced them with a sharp command. Then we have little time. If traitors have allied with pirates, they mean to strike soon. Her gaze met Elias's. "Will you stand with me?" Elias didn't hesitate, until the end. The betrayal, the attack came 2 nights later. As the palace slept, the traitors struck. Hidden explosives tore through the gates and armored rebels swarmed the courtyards. From above, pirate ships descended, raining fire on the outer walls. Alarms blared through the palace. Guards scrambled, confused and outnumbered. Elias was already awake. He had learned long ago to sleep lightly in hostile territory. Grabbing his weapon, he rushed to Solari's chambers. She stood ready, clad in light armor, her eyes burning with determination. "They mean to end the throne tonight." "Then we don't let them," Elias said. Together they moved through the halls, rallying loyal guards. The fighting was fierce, corridors filled with smoke, marble floors shattered by plasma fire. Elias fought with precision, every strike meant to protect Solari. She in turn commanded with authority, guiding her people with calm courage. Yet the enemy was strong. The pirates had brought heavy weapons, and the traitors knew the palace well. Step by step, the defenders were forced back toward the throne room, the last stand in the throne room. The throne room became the final line of defense. The great crystal pillars shook as explosions echoed outside. Loyal guards formed ranks, their spears glowing with energy. Solari stood before them, tall and unyielding. Elias moved to her side. "If they break through here, it's over." "Then they will not break through," she answered. The gates burst open and the enemy surged inside. Pirates in ragged armor, traitors in stolen uniforms. Their leader, a tall noble in crimson, stepped forward. "It ends tonight, Solari," he sneered. "Your rule is weakness. You trust outsiders. You poison our traditions. But we will restore the Veyari to strength." Solari's voice cut through the chaos. "Strength built on treachery is no strength at all." The battle began. Blades clashed. Energy bolts flew. Smoke filled the air. Elias fought fiercely, his movements sharp and efficient. He cut down pirate raiders with ruthless precision, his human endurance driving him through exhaustion. Solari fought too, her staff glowing with power, each strike echoing with authority. The sight of their princess refusing to fall inspired her guards, who rallied even as their numbers dwindled. But the enemy pressed harder. The crimson noble forced his way forward, striking down 2 loyal guards in his path. His weapon clashed with Solari's, the impact shaking the floor. "You cannot win," he shouted. "We already have," she answered, her voice steady even as her arms trembled. Elias saw her falter. He moved quickly, intercepting the noble's next strike. Blade met blade, sparks flying. "You picked the wrong people to betray," Elias growled. The duel raged. The noble was skilled, but Elias had survived war on DEATHWORLDs. Every trick, every feint, every brutal strike Elias used with precision. At last he disarmed the noble and brought him to his knees. Solari stepped forward, her staff raised. For a moment silence fell over the room. "You wanted strength," she said coldly. "Here it is." With a swift strike she ended his rebellion. The remaining traitors faltered, their will broken. The guards surged, driving them back. Within minutes the throne room was secure. After the battle the palace was scarred but still standing. Fires burned in the courtyards, smoke rising into the night sky. Yet Solari still stood unbroken, her people rallying to her side. The pirates fled, abandoning their allies once they realized the rebellion had failed. Loyal ships chased them into the void. Elias stood at Solari's side as the council was summoned once more. This time the chamber was silent, not with suspicion but with awe. Solari addressed them, her voice strong despite her exhaustion. "You have seen what trust brings. Without Captain Ward, I would be dead. Without the alliance we have begun, this throne would be lost. From this day forward, let it be known, the Veyari do not stand alone." Her gaze swept across the chamber. "We stand with humanity as equals." There was no protest this time. One by one, the counselors bowed their heads. The choice was made. A moment beneath the stars later, after the chaos had settled, Solari and Elias walked once more to the balcony overlooking the rivers of light. "You saved me again," Solari said softly. "Not only from death but from doubt." Elias shook his head. "You didn't need saving. You were stronger than any of them. I only stood beside you." She smiled faintly. "And that is why you are different. Others crave power for themselves. You lend your strength to others. That is why trust can grow between us." For a long moment they stood in silence, watching the stars. Two figures from different worlds bound not by fear but by choice. Epilogue. The Alliance of Equals. In the months that followed, the alliance took root. Human envoys arrived working beside Veyari diplomats. Trade and knowledge flowed between their worlds. The story of the trials and the battle spread across the galaxy. Some spoke of the strange human who survived where none expected. Others spoke of the princess who defied fear to trust the outsider. But for those who were there, the truth was simpler. It was the story of two people who stood side by side, and in doing so changed the fate of their worlds. And so, under the glowing stars of Celeranus, a new chapter began. An alliance not of conquerors and subjects, not of suspicion and fear, but of equals. The galaxy would never be the same.